Hello, thank you for coming out to my talk today. Just a little bit about me. My name is Vince Davis. I'm a senior software engineer. I've been doing this for about 7 or 8 years. And as far as context for the talk, I've worked at companies that have dev units as big as, well, as small as 3 and as big as 50. So I've worked with various amounts of different type of QA and UX designers. So this is what brought me to come to this talk of playing nice with QA and UX. So just an overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll play a little bit of the blame game. Once we get into it, you'll see what I mean about that. I'll have you sit on the couch for a little bit. I won't go too much into therapy, but it does play a part into playing nice with your counterparts. Again, code helps all, so once we get off the couch, we'll talk a little bit about code. We'll have a little bit of takeaways, and hopefully there's enough time at the end to where I can demo some of what I'm talking about today. So with this, who can relate? So you've gone with your development groups, designers have made a great app, you've coded it, QA has tested it, it's out in the App Store, everything's great. Then the reviews start coming in. The app crashes all the time. Really want to use the app, but the app crashes. The app looks bad. App does what it's supposed to do. I can get stuff accomplished, but for whatever reason, the app just doesn't look good. You also have the app looks good, no crashes, but I'm just not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing with this app. What is the point of this app? And then always my favorite, it just sucks. They can't even download the app, but it sucks. I can't help you with that one today, but hopefully we've all seen this one. How are you giving us a review and you've never downloaded our app? So now it's who's to blame? I don't know. Is it the UX design? Did they not design it right? Did they not do the use cases right? Is it our QA who QA'd it, got all the acceptance criteria, went through, tested everything? Is it their fault? Or is it our fault? The wizards, the magicians, the person that puts everything together. Is it us? In reality, it's all of us. It's the whole team. And that's really, as all on the teams that I've worked on, that's something that's always gotten lost in translation. Even if it's not your particular fault, it's the whole team's fault. For example, in App 1, you designed it great, which is UX. It does what it's supposed to do, which is tested by QA, but it crashes. It's still a fail. We all fail. Another app would be an app that's designed great, there's no crashes, so UX, they did their job, but for whatever reason, it's still not doing what it's supposed to do. It's still a fail. And then there's another version of it. There's no crashes, it does what it's supposed to do, but it's just not designed very well. In all these cases, some different portion of the dev team failed, so in effect, we all failed. So what we really have to remember is we're all on the same team. So with that, just really remember that. We're all trying to make the same app. We're all trying to get this done together. Remember, we all have the same user base. Even though we're coming from it from different viewpoints, whether it's design, whether it's QA, we're all trying to please the same user base. And again, we all work for the same company. You might have some offshore here and there, but for the same thing, we all have the same mission, same goal in place, so we really have to keep that in mind. And really, you work with these people 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year. I put that because I'm hoping you're taking vacation while you're doing this. I'm not working 52 weeks a year. I hope nobody else here is either. So just really keep in mind that you really see these people more than you see sometimes your own family members. So really just hammer in that we all work for the same. We're all on the same team. So in the mighty words of Carlos from BitConnect, what am I going to do? What am I going to do as a developer to help this situation? If you've never seen Carlos from BitConnect, take 5 minutes out of your day, YouTube this. It's a good 5 minutes, you'll get a good laugh out of it. So what are you going to do? Well, first off, this is where we're going to start to sit on the couch a little bit. You really have to show empathy. You really have to get out of your tech coding bubble and really look at it from the QA and the UX point of view. So that really understand that sometimes, depending on how big your company is, your QX and UA sometimes have a different chain of command. They might have managers that they report to, and even though they're on your team helping you design it, they might have other things that they have to be aware of that you're not necessarily aware of. Sometimes they're not as technical as you think. I've worked on some teams where we had QA, but they're not really QA engineers, so they really don't know anything much about coding. It's really, here's my acceptance criteria, this is what I need to test. That's as far as my knowledge of coding goes. So you really have to understand like what their technical range is. And really keep in mind that nobody is really trying to put out a bad app. At least I hope not. Nobody in your company is trying to sabotage how the app comes out and how it gets released. So really just try to show that empathy. So tips for that: really see if you can be in the design process as early as possible. Depending on how big the company is, you might have a group of 5 to 10 designers, and they talk about it months before you even see any type of prototype. Try to get into those talks as early as possible. Sometimes I've run into a situation where you're in the meeting with design and they've already done use cases, they've already tested this out with the users, and you get this prototype in your face and you're like, I can't do that. Or we can do it, but it's going to take us way longer to do than what we've been given. So if you were in those talks as early as possible, you could have brought these up earlier, which gets to my next bullet point. Any cause of concern, please bring those up as early as possible. You definitely want to, once you hear glimpses of, oh, we're trying to redesign an app, or we are bringing out a new app, try to get in those talks as early as possible. You're the technical expert, so you'll be able to bring up those situations. I've had situations where they've tried to redesign how they want a map to show up. And again, it's possible, but it's just adding on extra hours and costs that they didn't really bring up or think about in the beginning. So that's where you as the technical expert comes into play. And as far as with QA, just really try to figure out what their likes and dislikes are. Every QA that I've dealt with is a little bit different. For example, some, if you have a ticket, they will go through it, 90% of it works right, 10% of it fails. One QA might fail the whole project, another one might pass it but then make a minor bug. I prefer the latter, but again, please find that out, talk to your QA, befriend them if you have to, buy them some coffee. Making best friends with QA is not a bad thing. So I know what you're thinking. I came here for code. Please show me some code. Please show me how I can do this in code. We're all technical people. We like to solve problems through coding. So let's see if we can try and help out our QA and our UX with some code. So how are we going to do that? So before I get into that, if you want to download the code base to follow along, hopefully there's time for me to go into this a little bit in detail. The code is here that I'll be talking about from here on, and so I'll leave that up for a quick second. Okay, so with that, how can you help out QA and UX through code? What I found out is really trying to have a debug section in your app. That debug section can be anywhere really where you feel fit to have it in your app and wherever it really makes sense. I've had apps to where we've hidden it behind gestures on the settings screen. So if you did a 5 double tap on a particular part of the screen, our hidden debug section will pop up. I've had situations where if you're in, depending on the schema you are in Xcode, if you're in debug or release, it would show up in the settings section as well. So there's various ways of doing it. You just really have to find a way that works for your app and how your app is designed. And remember, it's just not for QA, it's also for you as well. And there's only 3 things listed, and these are the 3 things we're going to talk about today as far as having a style guide, strings, and debug views. But you can use this for various amounts of other things. Some other use cases for the debug section. You could have a section where you have all your network calls. So you just want to see all the network calls that you have for a particular app. You can have it in one spot, and you can easily do particular calls from there. I've had apps where we've used that portion of it for debug, for the fact that we had easily over 35 different calls, and we just wanted to have a list of where all the particular calls that this app is making. You can actually have it to where you can access the raw data from your persistent store database. Now, you might be in your UI and you are looking at a particular record and you can't really figure out why a particular piece of information isn't showing up. Well, if you had a debug section where you could put in the raw data, you could actually see how that information actually looks in your database. Another one is for viewing logs. Sometimes you might have people out in the field testing your app, or you might have a sales marketing team trying to show off the newest beta that you have, and they run into some issue. Versus trying to on the fly try to figure out what they're trying to do or what they've done inside the app. If you have a log file that you're saving your stuff to as they're going through the app, this could be something to where you could have a section in your debug to where they can send you that log, and then you can pretty much try and troubleshoot what they're going through. So the first part we're going to talk about is adding the style guide to your debug section. The style guide can include labels and all your different fonts that you use inside the app, and as well as colors. These two have been 2 big pain points in any app that I've worked on as far as incorporation. You get a whole bunch of colors and styles from the UX, and they're going through and they're like, what color red is that? I don't remember which color red I gave you. Well, if you have a style guide portion in your debug app, you can easily tell them to go to that portion of the debug, and that'll tell you the hex that they're using. Also, it really helps to really standardize your app as far as when you say red, when we say brand red, this is the red we're using. When we say, for example, info warning background, everybody knows what that is. It also works for fonts, and it also helps with bringing on new designers, new people to the team that aren't familiar with the app, aren't familiar with the way you name things, aren't familiar with the type of fonts you use. So it sort of gives you like that overview of this is how we standardize our app. Gives it a good standard look and feel, and you know all the shapes and fonts that you're using for the particular app. And then again, it also helps new devs see all the fonts and colors that you're using on the app. So the code for this is just one way you can do it. There's many of ways you can do it. In this particular one, you just have a strut for your style. So you just have static lits for all of the type of fonts that you're using, fonts, the weights, and the all fonts at the top is really covering how that gets pulled into that screen that I just showed before. So these are the particular names that I would have gotten from the QA. So Title I Heavy, that's what the UX team calls it. And that's how it relates to this in the app. So when you're looking through that one screen, you'll be able to see exactly how UX references that particular font. This one is for color. So pretty much looks almost identical to the style one. And here it is in color. Keep in mind that color RGB is an actual helper extension file, which I can show you a little bit more once we get into the demo. So another pain point in apps that I've worked on is strings. You have a ton of strings, your app is localized, and you just want to see if all your strings are translated. So what I've done in a lot of apps is have a strings debug view to where you can see all your strings. The bold is the key for that particular string, and then under it is the actual string that would be translated into the app. This one on the right is the same thing, but in Spanish. So you can easily pull up every single string that you use in your app, and you can see it all in one spot. It really makes for trying to debug translations a lot easier versus you having to go to every single portion of your app to figure out if something is translated or not. So again, it helps you see all the strings that you have in your project. You can quickly see which string is not translated, which has been key for speeding up the whole translation process in apps that I worked on. Again, it's also easy for QA to spot check any type of translation issues. And this is the code for that. So it looks pretty similar to the code that I showed for style and color. You'll have all your strings in a extension string at the very bottom, and at the top, the all fonts, which actually should say all strings, will pull in all the strings that you have, so it would pull out on that table view that I showed before. The extension in the middle is really to help out for if there's other ways that you get your strings into the app. For example, one of the clients that I used to work on, we had an SDK for OneSky. So we got all our translations back from OneSky real time. So we really didn't have to mess around with the localized strings file. So what this does is all I would have to do is change in here where I'm pulling my strings file from, and I wouldn't have to change any other code in my app. As long as we use the same key, all you have to do is change this extension, and then you could pull it from different types of areas where you're getting your strings. So it really helps for that. And also, if you're using a static lit, you're not having to worry about any typos as far as when you're typing in your strings. So I really suggest, if you take anything away, stop using the strings in your strings and start using some type of static lit for your strings files. Next one, and one to take a little bit more time, is the debug views. So with this is a part of your debug screen that'll let you see every type of view controller, custom views that you have in your app, to where you can get to a particular point in your app without having to go through the entire flow of your app. This is really big for if you have a huge app and it will take you 5 to 6 steps to get to something, and you just need to test the very last view controller on that stack. With this, you could easily just go to that and select that and play around and make sure that it looks how you want it to. So with that, this debug view will list out all your object classes inside of a certain bundle. You can select it by bundles, and I can go on that a little bit in detail once I get to the demo. You can split it out by object type. I like to split it out by view controllers, collection views, UI table cells, and views. As you can see on the image on the right, you can have different use cases for view controllers. So if you don't have any parameters coming in, you can have a none use case. If you particularly want to see how it looks with the red background, you could do that. But you could set up multiple use cases for a view controller, just in case you have multiple scenarios as far as how you use this particular view controller. And you can quickly see if any view controllers and cells are doing the same thing, which I'll show in a bit. So to do this, you do need to do a little bit of Objective-C. You really need this public extension on the bundle, and what this is doing is using Objective-C to go through a particular bundle and find all of the classes that you have in that particular bundle. This was taken from another Vincent who did a talk earlier this year. So I really suggest that you take a look at that video to go get a little bit more detail of how this all came about. With this slide, I just took it one step further. His really focused just on looking at all the view controllers, where I took it and made it for not only view controllers, but for other views and other cells in your app as well. So with this, the possibilities are endless. So as you can see on this one, you can have a view where you show all the different type of table view cells in one row so you can easily quickly see what type of cells that you're using in your apps and if there's any type of duplications as well. And it doesn't also go to UI table cells. You can also use this for views. So if you have multiple views, like a star rating view, you can have all your views listed so you can easily see how everything's been designed and give it some type of use case. So any gotchas that came up with this? Really depending on how you set up your project, you might have to go through a few ways of implementing your views in your UI table view cells and your view controllers. And this is really if you instantiate with or without storyboards, makes it a little difficult. So once we go through the demo, I can show you that a little bit more in detail. You have setting up your views and your view controllers would really, having one standard way of setting up or instantiating a view controller would really make the setup a lot easier for you. But again, it's able to do it if you're doing it with storyboard or any other way as well. So now it's time for a demo. So let me, so this is the app here. And so this would be your main view controller. Again, this would be the button that gets you to your super secret debugging. And again, this really is going to depend on where you want this debug to show up in your app, and it'll be different. You can have gestures, you can put it wherever, it really doesn't matter as long as you have some type of way of accessing it. So from this, we have our style guide, we have our strings, and we have our debug views. So in the style guide, we have a list of all the colors that would be used inside the app. And then we have a list of all the fonts that would be used as well. So that would be useful if, your designer came up and wasn't really sure what hex he gave you for that particular red. He could easily go here and say, okay, I gave this particular hex, and they could easily verify if that's the right color that they were looking for from here. For your strings, this is going to list out all your strings here, and this is going to be in bold, the key, and then down here it would have the extra description, which we are pulling from here. So these are all my string files here, and they're pulling it in from all fonts, which actually should be all strings. And then we have our debug view. So here's the bundle list. So this is pretty much pulling in every single view controller that we're using in the app, with a few caveats that we'll get into in a second. So if I go to my main app controllers, you can see that it's pulling in a login view controller, a main view, strings table, debug, and debug table. And as you can see from here, those are the view controllers that I have listed here. It's also pulling in the custom table cells that I brought in, which is the color view, which is this one here, the font view, which is here, and the string cells, which is here. And you're seeing why the string cell says not set up, and I'll explain that in a second. And then also we have all the views. So this is just a particular view that's in here, star rating view, that you can play around with. But this is just a custom view that might be on some type of review or ratings page, but you just want to have all those views listed in one spot so you can easily see how they're being rendered out. So how would you get to getting to one of these? So for this one here, so we'll go do this. So once you click into a particular UI view controller, you'll see you have a different types of use cases. You can have none, so it'll just render it how it's supposed to be rendered without any variables coming in, or you could do another use case where you have a red background. And then you have different actions. You can push it, present it, or present it with the navigation controller. In this instance, we'll push it. So now that's my main view controller from the beginning. Just happens to be in a red background. And how that was accomplished was, again, going through and setting up how that Objective-C that's pulling in everything. But once you do that, you have to put an extension onto that particular Get rid of that. You have to put an extension on that's adhering to this particular protocol here. So it's a debug controller instantiable. So this particular protocol is requesting three things: your debug description, the use cases you want to use, and then how you have to init your view controller. And this is how it's going to vary from project to project. This one, it's not using a storyboard, so it's very easy to init. And then this is just how you can switch on your use cases. The use cases can be anything you want. They don't have to be anything particular. You're just setting them up as enums so you can easily know what I need to do for each use case. So in this particular use case, we had red background. So once we instantiate our view controller, we change the background red and we return our view controller. So for that, that's how that worked out. And I also set this up in there in the login view. I didn't set up any use cases, and you don't have to use use cases. If there's only one way, there's no particular variation in your particular view controller, there's no reason to set up a use case. So this pumps up, and how that looks on the login view is, again, we have a different debug description, which is different from the main view. I'm not using any use cases, so that's only none shows up. And for this one, I actually had to instantiate a nib, so this one looks slightly different from the one I just previously showed you. But once you set it up, you just pass back your view controller and you're all set. So there's a lot of different ways you could use this. I particularly use it if we have a long flow and it's 5 sections down to get to log in, or once you're logged in, you don't see the login screen anymore, and it's really hard to debug on a particular device. So if you have it to where you have all your view controllers listed, you can easily get to any portion of your app and quickly do a debug as far as how it's going to work. And this also works for table cells. So again, we have the table cells listed. As you can see, if we go to the color view cell, we instantiated what the debug cell instantiable. And here we just have to init the cell. There's not too many use cases I've run across to where I want to have variations in different use cases for cells. Again, it can be used, but I haven't had to run across that yet. And then once you do that, you just really have to set up how you want that particular one to look. So I just got all my colors, I pulled the first one, and then I just set up the name, label, and return the cell, which returns this. What this really helps is if there's a huge project, you have multiple people working on a particular project, and for some reason you have this particular type of cell multiple times. So if somebody else has made this, you could easily go here and see how many different variations of cells you have, and then that could sort of help you clean it up. So if you're going through and somebody named it color view cell 2, but it looks exactly like color view cell 1, you might not need color view cell 2. So you can easily see what people or what other developers are using inside of your app. Now, why this one says not set up is simply because it doesn't have this extension protocol anywhere in its setup. So if I go to the strings cell, which is here, you can see none of that set up. So again, with this, you can also see quickly all the table cells you have set up, and then you can quickly glance and see which ones aren't set up, and then you can quickly go to that particular cell and set it up. Again, this also works for views. So if we go to the star rating view here, you go down to the bottom, you can see that there's a debug view instantiable protocol, and then you just have to init your view, set up your frame, set up your settings, return your view, and that'll show up. If this wasn't here, you would get again, a not set up view, just like you have for this particular one here. So that is that. Go back to the slides. So takeaways. Remember, don't be so quick to blame another group for the failure of the app. Remember, we're all in this together. And again, there could be various reasons of why the app did or didn't project or fail the way it did. show some empathy and some understanding for what QA and UX has to do. Again, they might not be under the same leadership as you, so again, just really take stuff like that into consideration and really try to implement some, if not all, of the tools in the debug view that'll really help not only you, but it'll also help QA and UX as well. And even if you don't have QA, again, these tools can be used to help you in any projects that you have as well. And that's it. So this is the GitHub right here. We have plenty of time, so if you have any questions. Yes. Yes.
Have you come into a project before and added a debug menu and added these things? Added the style guide?
Have I come into a project and used the style guides?
And added that to the project too?
Yes. So at a previous company, we had an issue where we would have many of, like if you go back to this and go to the style guide, I pulled this from an old client I worked on. We had 6 different shades of gray. Nothing like the book, but still, it's a lot of shades of gray. And when there was issues where they would come back and say, I'm not sure which type of gray you used, we could always just refer them back to the style guide and say, tell me which gray you want us to use and we'll use it. So it really helped out in that, where there's the back and forth with developers, with designers, and there's multiple shades of a certain color that they've wanted, and they've given us a particular title for that color. We can easily just refer them to the style guide and tell us what color from this list that you want us to use, and we could almost guarantee that that would be the color that they wanted. So to answer your question, yes, I've used this in previous clients and it's worked out great. Yes?
For data-heavy views, are you stubbing data that you're including in there, or are you using data from the app as it's currently running? Or?
Am I for the style guide or for the debug view?
For where you pull up the actual views.
So
If it's a table view or something that needs a bunch of data, how are you handling that?
both. So I've done that in situations where, let's go to the main view controller. In this case, it's just a demo, so there's no stubbing of data, but in previous ones, if you have some type of persistent store on the device, this is easily where you could say, give me the first record, doesn't matter what it is, so I could just see how it looks. So in this case, you could use it to actually stub out data as long as you have the persistent store, or if you wanted it to be consistent from whether you're seeing it or somebody else's device, you could put in whatever data you wanted. Again, it's just going to really depend on how your view controller is set up to handle that. But yeah, you could, to answer your question, you could use it either for stubbing your data or pulling data from a database if you have it connected. All right, well, thank you. I'll be around for the rest of the conference, and if you have any questions, just let me know.